Hi, everybody, and welcome to our series, The A to Z of Social Entrepreneurship. My name is Nziki Nkiza, and I'm excited to keep sharing with you as we run through the alphabet. So today's letter is E. And I don't know if you can guess what E is. I don't know where your mind initially goes when I say E. But when I thought about E, I wanted to do a term that is sort of a buzzword in corporate and in general across the impact sector. It is something that is international as well as locally recognized. So locally speaking to referring to the South African context. And this phrase is called ESG. Okay, now if you've heard of ESG, you will know that it stands for environment, social, and governance, right? And basically, ESG is a broad term that is being used by corporates and governments worldwide to incorporate three key elements that we should be thinking about in creating better impact in the world. So the environment aspect looks at reducing environmental impact, and if you kind of link that to the Sustainable Development Goals that were agreed upon by the UN, and we'll speak about those in a later video. So just gave away what S is. But if you think about those, so SDG 7, 12, 13, and 15 are all environmentally related. So climate change, clean water systems, looking after forests and reducing deforestation. Ooh, that word. Deforestation, and then also planting new forests. So that's all around, environment. And this is things like companies, corporates, you as a startup should be thinking about, if you are, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, how do you deal with the environmental aspect, right? So is your packaging recyclable? Is your packaging made from biodegradable materials? Are the finished goods, so if you're a product business, do your products biodegrade? What's the environmental impact of that? If you're a manufacturing company, thinking about how much water do you use in your manufacturing process? Where do the poisonous products, so for example in fashion, if you're dyeing clothes, where does the dye go? What happens to the water that has been contaminated by that dye? Are you using an environmentally friendly dye, right? And a big move around slow fashion has been to say that not only are there bad practices around employment, which we'll talk about later, but the fact that like a lot of companies actually just send their dye polluted water back into the water system, right? And it's important that we think about the fact that, or that we remain mindful of the fact that our ecosystems are connected, right? So if something's damaged here, that will eventually filter out to you. So a mindfulness around that. From a social perspective, the S stands for social, and that is really all around shareholder engagement. So looking at your communities, looking at employee practices, looking at your beneficiaries, and how you're engaging with all of those individuals. And that within an SDG context includes SDG 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, and 11, right? And those are all the SDGs around reducing inequalities, creating sustainable economic opportunities, sustainable cities, integration, those kinds of things, right? So being mindful of that, and really how do you incorporate shareholder value? How do you incorporate shareholder engagement, right? And this is really a big shift where from a corporate perspective, corporates are now starting to be more mindful of looking at their end consumers as part of the shareholders in the business and measuring their impact not just on sales and profit maximization and return to their shareholders in terms of investors, but also looking at the returns to their shareholders in terms of employees, right? So we're seeing a lot more corporate things where employees can own a percentage of the business, where corporates have set up investment schemes that invest benefit employees, and then also just as an end goal, incorporating your beneficiaries. So if you're running an impact business, is giving some level of ownership to your beneficiaries. So if you have a small farming village that you're supporting, a fishing community, if you have a group of ladies who are sewing stuff for you, you're not just taking the product from them and reselling it somewhere, but it's going, how do you share the value chain? How do you share the value that is created with them and make them co-creators and therefore co-benefactors of what you're doing? And finally, governance, right? And that is really looking at strengthening corporate governance by ensuring openness around and transparency around operations and procedures and processes and things like that. So corporates need to be more open around their hiring. So if you look at things like and this is, I suppose, more applicable to publicly listed companies, but we want to know what the private ones are doing too, because hey, we buy from you. Just thinking about that, like, how did, like, what was the process that was used for reaching a particular decision, right? Especially when you're looking at the supply chain. What are your practices in terms of deciding who your supply chain partners are, where you're procuring, what are your procurement practices? If you're in South Africa, what does triple BEE, so broad-based Black economic empowerment in that context look like? And that is linked to SDG 9 and SDG 17. So really going, how do we strengthen governance overall? How do we create more transparency, especially where money is concerned, and we can make sure that the funds that have gone in actually reach the beneficiaries, actually have impact where they're supposed to have impact, and so forth. And then something that we'll speak about in one of the future videos on funding, just give away is really going, okay, cool. So if this is all happening, it's important that we're mindful that ESG is also something that influences impact investing. So a lot of impact investors are actually looking at your ESG scale, and they want to know, what is your environmental impact, what's your social impact, how is your governance set up, and those are all key things to think about. Now, I do want to stress that as a startup, if you just have an idea, if you are in the early stages, you don't have to tick absolutely all the boxes, right? You don't have to like be good at everything, right? Just focus on getting one part of your business right, and then build in all the other impact things. But what I do want to say that it's a lot easier to start with your impact built in than to get to a stage where you are making X amount of revenue or profit and then are having to change that and then try all of a sudden to be impactful. And I would say it's really important that you have an ESG strategy. So from the beginning, have a strategy on how are you going to make sure that your company is environmentally conscious. How are you going to make sure that your company and business practices are socially impactful, right? And then that you have good social engagement, that you have good shareholder engagement. And how do you make sure that you've got good governance in your business from the beginning, right? And governance for me is just really something that you cannot skim on at all. And also just a mindfulness that as a startup, your ESG metrics are things that you will have to report on, and that when you're doing pitches as well, especially to impact investors, it does look good on your pitch to kind of speak to what are you doing in terms of ESG. And then also, I mean, I'm not sure if it's the names of these kinds of interventions in other countries, but in South Africa, there's specifically enterprise supplier development programs. So if you're wanting to become an ESG supplier to a corporate, a lot of corporates are thinking about ESG in that space. And also for you as a supplier, it really just does also add points and make you a better candidate if you can go to your potential corporate partner that you're wanting to form part of their supply chain and say, hey, in addition to you doing this work, we also do this great work with our ESG, and that multiplies all the great impact. So yes, that is it on ESG. I hope you found that helpful and informative. Please do connect with us. We are happy to answer questions, share knowledge. We've got a whole bunch of free resources that we can connect you to. But also from a consulting perspective, if you're like, I have no idea where to start, we've got a fantastic team that can consult with you, and that is you as a startup as well as you as a corporate or a nonprofit. If you're stuck on what to do with your ESG, we would absolutely love to work with you and help you how to figure that out. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next A to Z of Social Entrepreneurship. Hi there, if you want to join our Social Impact Founders membership community here at MentHer, which is a global mentorship network supporting female social entrepreneurs, head over to our website, www.menther.co.za. You can also send us an email at info.co.za, and you will receive your free copy of a social impact guide on how to start a business and life of purpose and impact. See you online.